bill, like a 3-day conference talking about the wage bill. It was very well attended. Yeah.
What are they going to go take it down, take it up, or are they going to live within their means?
Well, that's a very good question. That's why we have in the studios today John Monyoncho. He's a commissioner with the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, talking about taming the huge wage bill. Do we have to have a conference to talk about the wage bill? Was it necessary?
Now, last week's focus was on this wage bill doesn't seem to be moving as fast as we want. The law demands that we be at only 35% of the revenue that we collect. If I'm collecting 100 shillings, say, 35 is the maximum I can spend on wage bill. All right? That is what the law states. Now, if you look at, from the time the commission was established, that rate has not gone below 47%, which is the one that now we are talking about last week. It was around, before the commission was established, around 55%, came down 51, 50, 48. We are currently at 47%. And we're asking ourselves, if we are spending all this money on paying wage bill, this money could actually be doing other things, especially we talk about development projects, so that it generates more money for us to be able to pay better to the employees that we have in public service. So our focus this time was, can we think about efficiency? Is it possible to think about doing more with less? Because that's one way of doing it. Okay, productivity is very important, and therefore we are not exactly focusing on reducing the payments or reducing remuneration. Is saying, can we do more with what we exactly have? And that was the big discussion in the conference this time. And therefore, because productivity is a slightly different side, from the commission perspective, we have a mandate that we need to recognize and reward productivity and performance. But for you to reward it, it must exist.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, we have been having performance contracts and performance reviews. But performance and productivity are different. You can perform, but very inefficiently. So we are asking ourselves, yes, you can get 100% in performance because you actually met your goals or your deadlines or whatever it was, but how did you do that? And that was the bigger discussion this time in the conference.
Some people discuss these amounts and say, no, this is enough. But that someone talking has got like on 924,000 or 1.1 million saying live within your means or plan yourself accordingly. Because you know how much police are paid and teachers and
The demand for services across the nation are obviously increasing. And they're increasing at a faster rate than what we are able to collect to ensure that those services are provided with the remuneration you're talking about. All right? Last year, when the commission was reviewing, because every 4 years we need to review the salaries of employees, we sat down and we looked at what they're earning, and it's not sufficient. For sure, I agree with you. It's not sufficient. And we said, you know what? Is there a way we can be able to review this pay to a place where it's reasonably, you can say it's reasonable. It may not be sufficient, but reasonable. And we had engagements with the National Treasury, but they told us we don't have that money. The only money we have is this amount. So how do we handle this amount and we want this amount? It became very difficult. So it is true. I don't think we are compensated sufficiently to be able to do the work that we do, because if you are to actually do the proper compensation, we should be doing a review like 5 to 6% every year based on inflation. So if for 10 years, you've only been doing 1 or 2%, 3%, it simply says the value of what you're earning 5 years ago and today you cannot get what you got 5 years ago. So part of the discussion here is, how can we be able to get our economy running faster so we generate higher revenues so as to compensate higher without necessarily busting the 35% margin? And that's very possible. Just we need to be more productive. Our culture, working culture, which we talked about last week, needs to change. We can't be saying we want to eat more when we can't produce it.
Right.
It means I must pick it from somebody else for me to consume it, and that's not a proper way of doing it. So I agree with you. It's not, when you look at the global picture, yes, it's huge. But as you're saying, the person who is earning the 924 million is enough. It's totally incorrect to say that people are actually earning enough. If you look at there's a survey that we did, because before we gave the advice on, or before we even get into the conference of the 35%, we carried out a salary survey that showed that most, probably all, the whole of central government, nobody is above what we call the 39th percentile. What do I mean? When you take salaries in the market, look at the market, maybe your position, and I compare with the market, I look at what the market is paying. And I ask myself, if the market is paying for an economist X, should government be paying the same? No. Why? Because it's the private sector that generates the monies, government consumes, basically. That's all we do. So if we allow them to be at this level, then government, at least where they could be about halfway. So that at least we allow that margin for the private sector. So that's called, so we discover that most, the central government or public service employees in central government, not in state corporations, we are at less than 50th percentile. We are around 32nd, 32. Private state corporations are up 75%, about 75% and above. Okay, so it means we first of all have to think about these ones who are below 50%, okay, 50 percentile, move them up to at least 50 percentile as a policy that the Commission has established, that central government, we should work as hard as possible. Let's see whether we can move our employees to 50th percentile, which simply says that they are actually not very well compensated. And that's just saying exactly what you've said. It's true. We need to find a way of doing and increasing that. So that's where the issue of productivity is coming in and saying, fine, I've been earning my 30, 40,000, but I want to earn 50,000. So how do I do that? We have to generate it. But how do you generate it? Do I pay you first? Because the employee says, you pay me first, then I will produce. Mm-hmm. The employer is saying, no, you produce first, then I pay you, because I'll have something to pay you from. And that's the main drive then that we had during the conference. Can we produce more with what we already have?
And how are you going to do that? How do you produce more?
You see, that's why, Jeff, what I was saying is that some of the resolutions were to help our institutions to think through the processes of ensuring that they look at their structures, they look at the overlaps that exist. We know there are many overlaps. There are, we've heard of continuous employment of staff who, of necessity, are not the key staff who will generate revenue, right, in our counties, in our state corporations. We have got duplications. You've heard a lot about ghost workers. People get fired, but they're never removed from the payroll. And therefore, these were, in my opinion, there are things that people know how to do, but I think decisions, that tough decision that I am going to do it, is what has been lacking. I mean, for example, if 200 people or 300 have left the payroll, why are they still on payroll? Just make a decision and remove them. But there could be somebody there who is sitting and saying, no, let them stay for a while because of probably interest that they may be having. So the resolutions were basically to look at the structures that people have right now, the different institutions have, find out whether there are any duplications, and remove those duplications. Because if you remove the duplications, you'll spend less. You'll be doing exactly the same, but you'll be spending less. Look at the payrolls. We have institutions that use what you call, they have more than one payroll. So they have one payroll which is official, and then they've got a manual payroll. And we are saying that cannot continue. You need to have only one payroll in any institution. Okay, we are discussing about the culture. We have chapter 6, which talks about the kind of culture we want to see. And if you critically analyze what chapter 6 really is talking about, is basically hard work, is about honesty, is about integrity, is about uprightness and forwardness. That's what it's talking about. But when you look at what kind of culture we have, that culture does not allow for productivity. It only just allows either for shortcuts. People want to get money as quickly as possible, whichever way they want to get it. And when they do that, what happens as the generation, we turn around the new generation, you can even see what's happening with our own children. Most of them, they don't want to work because they can see a lot of money around without people working, and they would like to do exactly the same thing. A culture that does not allow for growth and development. So those things that the resolutions that we passed, therefore, were to assist the institutions to know that should there be another conference or conference another time, some of them, what you're going to be marked against is what we agreed collectively as a nation that this is the route we would like to take. And because of that, we believe that the next 1 or 2 years, we should start seeing differences taking place in the institutions.
I mean, the person who's coming will just be sitting there and waiting for pay, end month. Is it possible that at some point, maybe instead of saying you be productive, then we pay you, or vice versa, we just get the best brains to do some of these jobs, get rid of some of the people in the payroll with these duplicated jobs, and get them into, let's say, out there, they get their retirement benefits, and they be more productive out of the system. Because if we keep doing this, it'll be over and over. I mean, the next 10 years will still be saying the wage bill is still high. We can't, like in counties, they say most of the money goes into paying workers, recurrent expenditure.
That's true.
So there are no roads, there's no this, there's no that, and it just goes on and on and on. And kidogo Jeff will be 115 years old, and you'll be here, and we'll be having the same conversation.
The new government superannuation scheme was, as a result, one of those resolutions for the last conference that we had in 2019. What does that mean? Prior to that, government was meeting the 100% cost of pension. Prior to that, 2018. Now, as soon as there is an option, if you are less than 45 years old, you must contribute to your pension.
Okay.
Right? If you are wholly recruited, you're recruited and you're younger than 45 years, you contribute. So that is a big thing that has happened since then, because the government realizes pension is becoming a pain and is very expensive. All right? That's one of those resolutions that was passed, which is actually being implemented as we speak. So part of that collective wisdom and collective responsibilities takes place, and therefore there's progress that we are able to see. The issue of harmonizing pension benefits, that's a study that has been completed, and therefore we're sitting down now with policies and saying, why should we have different benefits for public officers? If you join the government, then the benefit should be the same. Wherever you are at, should be either you're contributing 5, an employer 10, or 6, employer 2, whichever, it should be the standard. Nobody should say, I have a special one, you are different. No, one. That then helps as we move forward. So in terms of attraction, as you are saying, if you look at you can look at three layers within government: the lower cadre, the middle cadre, and the top cadre. All right? At the top cadre, we attract pretty well, and at the lower cadre. But the middle, we are not very good. All right? So that's where we find that in government, the lower cadre stays for long. Because of some of the allowances they get, it's slightly equal to what they earn, and therefore they say, even if I go to the private sector, I will not get the same. And probably I'll even work much harder to get the same amount. I mean, I've had a section of professionals who say I'd rather work in government because I'll work less and more for the same effort I'm putting in the private sector. Okay, that's not a very good
but you know, also government has security. You can work there for 30, 40, 50 years.
I agree. I mean, that's a good place to be at. It's a good place to be at. But I keep on asking myself, is that a system that we want to maintain into the future? Is that something that's going to help us? That yes, I'll come in and what I earn in the private sector, but work half the time. Because I'd rather do that than working in the private sector. So I was saying, so in the lower level, we are able to attract. In the higher level, yes, I think we are pretty well, and we are able to attract those individuals who come into government. But it's at the middle where that capacity, as you're saying, we are not able to attract. But we also want to ask ourselves, By the time we are like Singapore or Canada, where government is paying more than the private sector, until that happens, we need to think about how do we find a good balance. Because part of the role of the commission is to ensure that we are able to attract the requisite skills. And in every institution, we are told they are unable to attract. They are unable to attract. They are unable to attract. Or they attract, but they can't retain. Because you want to attract and you want to retain. Which means we have to continuously review what kind of packages do we have and continue to say, you know what, then we need to be able to adjust maybe beyond the 50th percentile, probably in the next, 4, 5, 6 years, we must move to 50th and still see what's going on in the market and what is it that we need as a government to take us where we want to go. I'm sure you remember in the mid-90s or late 90s about the Dream Team. Do you remember the Dream Team came on board?
Leaky and,
the Leaky, Kakunus and so forth. They came on board.
Kittil and Bathi.
Yeah.
And, yes.
They came in, did their part, but they were only, were they 10 or 12? And it didn't work very well because the whole of government needed to be moved. If your PS was earning 600,000 and you're earning 150 as his deputy, you'd say that the Dream Team members earning 600,000, 1.2 million, but the immediate are earning 200,000, it became very disillusional. And they said, no, this thing cannot work. And therefore, they struggled quite a bit. They did have what they could do, but we realized there's no way that this is going to move. We can't have 10 people trying to move the whole of government. We need to have the whole government moving together. And that's the point when remuneration began changing. So by the time the SRC was coming on board, of course, there are a lot of historical injustices that have already taken place. So one of those more difficult assignment is how do we harmonize and ensure that, as I mentioned at the beginning, that what we are paying within the public sector, which includes state corporation, is not too divergent. So that if I'm transitioning from central to state corporations, I'm transitioning because of a higher position, which most probably is going to call for higher productivity for myself as I transition.
That's some heavy stuff.
Very heavy.
That is some heavy stuff.
Is there a way also,
Yes.
we can, I don't know if it will fall under SRC, but having people who are skilled to do some jobs, because we have a lot of incompetency also in the system, and that also makes
redundancy.
Yes,
right.
Because you see,
Yes.
someone feels like if I bring someone who's a bit more smart, I'll be outshone and I'll lose my job. Is there a way some of these things can? Because when you can attract people from the public, from the private sector, but when they get there, they find how systems are operating. This guy hasn't gone to school. He can't even piece a sentence together.
But he's been there 40 years.
40 years.
And he's not leaving.
And he's not leaving. He doesn't know you can hit delete on the payroll.
He is the payroll.
Yeah.
What I know, it is. What I know, yes, there are opportunities, but it's not as bad as you're presenting it. That somebody can be there.
I'm just talking about one particular institution as an average.
I can't get an average with one institution anyway. but it's not as bad. But that's why I was saying that the current structure as is, where you can have an individual on discipline and yet not leaving the institution, they stay there for the next 5-10 years, and they're earning half pay. After 5-10 years, they've gone to court because of a discipline case, they end up winning.
And they're given back all the money that should have been paid.
Exactly. Exactly. And therefore, to fire a public servant is not easy. And that's why I'm saying the system needs to relook wholesomely. Do we want to continue this way? If you want to bring more productive people, you think if I bring so and so, I think I'll have a better output and better outcome. And you want to replace, central government doesn't work like that. You must advertise for the job, apply for the job, do all those screening, get somebody who you thought would be a good person. Maybe they're not the kind of quality you get later on, but then you get somebody on board. Once they're on permanent and pensionable, then you just have to play your cards right. Because if they are not productive or they're not performing, you must go through the whole process properly. First warning, second warning, third warning, call them. If they then don't respond, then you can actually tell them to leave. But that takes ages. That's how I'm saying the system needs to change for this turnaround to be much better, to attract the people we need to move at the speed we want to move. Which means then we have to, part of one of the other resolutions was to look at the tools that measure performance, not only from the institution level, but up to the individual level. So that if there's any reward that needs to be given to motivate people to perform, it is based on your output.
Is there a solution to this? Easing that burden. What is the solution?
You know, Jeff, for me, where I sit, maybe even not as a commissioner, I think decisions just have to be made.
Tough decisions?
Yeah, we've reached a point where there's something we call, because of lack of consequences, right? You had the president say, only 24% of all our government institutions have got unqualified financial accounts.
Right.
How is that possible?
24%.
24%.
That's a lot.
I mean,
A
not
quarter.
even a lot.
That's a
what I'm
quarter.
saying is that 70% of all institutions, their accounts, money has been misused and misrepresented. Because when you have a qualified accounts, it means you didn't either tell us all the money you have got, or you misspent it, or you did not pay something that you're supposed to have paid, you didn't pay the statutory deductions. That's what it means. So the only clean accounts we have is 24% of government institutions.
Wow.
And I liked what he said. Okay, so what's going to happen to the 6%? Can I get a report in 1 month, 21 days? What is going to happen? Yani, you think life will be as usual. You keep on losing money. We don't know where it's going. You can't explain where it has happened. And you think life is as usual? I want a report in 21 days. That was a very telling statistic that we are not financially accountable. Why? Lack of consequence management, which is one of the resolutions that was placed here, that there must be a level of consequence management. If you have a qualified account at the end of the year, something must happen. Now, because nothing is happening, Jeff, no problem, we'll have another one next year.
Right.
Another one next year.
Uh-huh.
You go spend money on refurbishment of a few hundred millions, refurbishment. You ask yourself, how do you refurbish with a few hundred millions? Refurbishment should be, a few shillings, a few thousand, hundreds of thousand shillings in terms of refurbishment. But you find that because of that, we continue to lose our money. So in terms of solution, what I'm saying, Jeff, is really, I don't think we are short of solutions. For us, what we wanted to see is that we have brought this to the fore and therefore take responsibility in your institution that this can change.
Right.
You can actually change it, but you can only change it if you take some hard decisions. I don't think we have options concerning that. Some of these are not very difficult things to do, Jeff. They're not difficult.
Like what? Give me 1, 2 examples.
Now tell me, why haven't all the functions, when the counties were established, there are many functions that were devolved, but they've never been released to be devolved. Why? Now everybody's complaining.
Yeah.
Some functions were devolved, we never got the money. All right? Some are still being held. Headquarters has a function, and also the counties, the same function, duplication of functions. That's why I was saying that if we remove these duplications, we will not be having this duplicate pay for people who are doing generally the similar things between national and county government. That is one.
You'll be depriving someone of a lot of money.
The culture that had already been established towards the end 90s, early 2000, was that your allowances were much higher than your pay, which is a very unfortunate thing, because government was saying, let's just increase allowances. Then, because we don't want to pay pension, let the salary remain where it was. And the commission comes on board and says, no, that is not right. The employer must be able to have a secure future that is based on his pay. So allowances have to reduce. They can't be more than 40% of what they're earning. If it's more than 40%, what's going to happen when they retire? And that is the discussion that I think I'm hearing, that it's important that your salary itself, the base pay, is is reasonable enough. I mean, the pension experts tell us it should at least be able to replace up to 70%. Now, that's on the higher side. Around in Kenya, I think we're around 45%. When you retire, that is how much it will cover you on a monthly basis when you retire.
No wonder people resort to stealing.
Well,